Hello and Namaskar. Welcome to the analysis of the Hindu newspaper dated March 8th, 2023. In this video, we are going to talk about a few important newspaper articles which we have taken from the Hindu newspaper, and they are going to be very important, very significant for the civil services examination. Let's start with the first important newspaper article. But before that, wish you a very happy and colorful Holi. I hope this Holi brings you more colors to your life and you end up studying a lot more than you have been, and you clear the civil services examination. So with this, let's now head to the first important newspaper article. Now, this particular newspaper article talks about the women empowerment, right? Because Nagaland has landed up with the first woman minister. Earlier, before that, there was no woman minister. Now, Salhot, I do not know how to pronounce that name, but Mrs. Kruse has become now become the first woman minister from Nagaland. Why is this article important? This article is important for GS paper 2 for understanding the issues related to women and government policies and interventions for development in various sectors, and issues arising out of their design and implementation is also very important and related to this particular newspaper article, right? So ahead of International Women's Day, Mrs. Kruse made history on Tuesday by becoming Nagaland's first woman minister, and the birth in the Nagaland cabinet led by Nifu Rio came 5 days after she and Hekani Jakhalu were elected as the first women MLAs of the state. So this is a very good news for the women empowerment in this particular state of Nagaland, right? So what about the women politics in India? Well, as of 2021, women make up only 22% of the total number of members in the Indian Parliament, which is a staggeringly very low percentage. Now, similarly, the number of women in the state legislative assembly is also low, with an average of around 9% representation. And you would be shocked to know that the states of Bengal and West Bengal and Bihar have done very much better in this regard. So some states have done much better than others, with the states like Bihar and West Bengal having a higher percentage of women representatives, right? They are very backward. They're considered to be very backward, but they consist of the highest percentage of the women representatives. So this is the state of women in politics in India, which is very shameful up to an extent, we can say. Now, what exactly are the reasons for the low representation? Well, gender stereotypes that women should handle the household activities and men should run the world. These are some of the stereotypes which leads to low representation. Well, competition also leads to low representation. So many of the politicians fear that in case of women reservation, their seats can be rotationally be reserved for women candidates and they will lose some of their seats. This becomes a major problem as well. The third reason behind is the lack of political education. So because of a lack of understanding of politics, they do not know about their basic and political rights. And apart from it, work and family responsibilities become very important for women and they lead to some kind of low representation in politics as well. Apart from it, you need political networks in order to get into the politics, right? So women being the newcomers have this problem of not having that political network like men do, and this leads to also low representation. Apart from it, there are lack of resources because of their low proportion in the inner political party structure of India. Women fail to gather resources and support for nurturing their political constituencies. And apart from it, social conditioning is such that women should run the household and men should run the world, and this also leads to low representation. Apart from it, we also have the unfriendly environment. So overall, political parties environment too is not women friendly. They have to struggle hard and face multi-dimensional issues to create space for them in the party, and there have been very much increase in the violence in the politics. So a significant rise in the criminalization, corruption, insecurity have driven women out of the political arena. If the political parties even are corrupt, they are criminalized, or politics in general is criminalized, right? This leads to driving these particular factors out of women out of the politics, right? So these are some of the reasons for the low representation. So what exactly has the government done in this regard? Well, the government came up in 2008. UPA government came up with the Women Reservation Bill 2008, which seeked to reserve 1/3 of all seats in the lower house of the parliament, that is the Lok Sabha, and in all in legislative assemblies for women. So 1/3 seats were to be reserved in the Lok Sabha as well as the legislative assemblies for the women according to this particular bill, but this particular bill was not passed. So this particular bill needs to come about in the near future if we want to increase the participation of women in the politics. And apart from it, we have the Article 243D, which talks about the women representation in the Panchayati Raj institution. Basically, 1/3 reservation for the women in the Panchayati Raj institutions is mandated. So these are some of the government efforts. Apart from it, we have the Parliamentary Committee on Empowerment of Women. So the Committee on Empowerment of Women was constituted for the first time in 1997 during the 11th Lok Sabha of the Parliament for improving the status of women. So the members of the committee are expected to work together for the empowerment of women, cutting across the party affiliation. So these are some of the government efforts. What can exactly be the way forward? Well, we need to first pass the women's reservation bill, which was not passed in the 2008. In the near future, we need to pass it. Apart from it, we also need to promote local bodies, female lawmakers on the state level. If the women make the laws, if the women legislators are brought about in the forefront, then what will happen? More women friendly policies will be formulated, and that will lead to increasing representation of women in the politics. And apart from it, women quotas in the political parties also needs to be increased, because if the structure of the political parties change, or if they become better, then what will happen? The political parties will elect more of the, or they will put forward the names of more eligible female candidates, right? So this is the way forward. Let's now talk about what can we conclude from this regard. Now, young Indian women represent aspirational India possibly more than any other grouping today, and given half a chance, they may bring a new energy into the stagnant politics. So the politics of India is getting stagnant, and women can bring about that particular change in this particular stagnant politics and move it towards the delivery of basic needs, health, nutrition, education, and livelihoods. So this is the conclusion that we draw from this particular newspaper article and this particular analysis of this particular newspaper article, right? Let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now this particular newspaper article talks about the heat waves, or in particular the rising temperature. Now these kinds of newspaper articles are important for the GS paper 1, that is salient features of the world's physical geography or Indian geography as well, right? So now let's first understand the context of it, and then we will talk about all the studies in this particular regard of why the climate change is happening, or why or how much the hotter the earth is getting, right? So now this year, the month of February was the hottest so far since 1901 in India. And according to the study in Lancet, which was published in July 2021, it says that 5 million people died on average each year worldwide because of the extreme temperature. This was recorded from 2000 to 2019. And the sixth assessment report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change states that extreme heat events will grow with increasing global warming, and that every increment of the warming matters. This means that the temperatures are rising. So how much exactly are the temperatures increasing? Well, according to the study by the Center for Study of Science, Technology and Policy on historical climate in India, shows that temperature in India has been steadily increasing both summer and winter, and the recorded increase in the maximum and minimum temperature over the 30 years is up to 0.9 degree and 0.5 degrees Celsius, right? So a joint report by the International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent. So there were 3 organizations. They presented a joint report which said that extreme heat events that was likely to happen only once in every 50 years without the influence of humans on climate. If there was no human interference in the climate change, then these particular heat waves or the climate change, extreme heat events would occur every 50 years. But with the influence of the humans on the climate, with the climate change which is sponsored by the humans, it is more likely to increase 5 times, right? Human induced climate change is going to increase by 5 times. So, and if the warming is under 2 degrees Celsius, such events will occur 14 times. And if the warming is kept under 4 degrees Celsius, they will occur only almost 40 times. So this is a staggeringly high number. And apart from it, the climate projections for the District of India by CSTP, C STEP study for a 30-year period of 2021 to 2050 shows that maximum temperature during the summer will increase even under a moderate emissions scenario, right? Now the increase is higher under the higher emissions scenario, likely to be greater than 2 degrees Celsius and up to 3.5 degrees Celsius in over 100 districts and 1.52 degrees Celsius in about 455 districts. So now even winter minimum temperature are projected to increase by 0.5 degrees Celsius to 3.5 degrees Celsius in the future, and while the highest warming of 2.5 degrees Celsius to 3 degrees Celsius is projected in fewer than 1% of the districts, an increase by 1.1 degrees Celsius to 1.5 degrees Celsius is projected in about 485 districts. And if we talk about the diurnal temperature range, which is the variation between high air temperature and low air temperature during a single day, is also changing. So a December 2020 study shows that there has been an alarming decline in the diurnal temperature range between 1991 and 2016 over the northwest parts of the Gangetic Plains and central India agroclimatic zones. So what does this particular study show? This particular study shows that this particular high air temperature during a higher temperature and low air temperature, which means that the highest temperature and the lowest temperature, the range between them is also decreasing, right? And it is clear that both summer maximum and winter temperatures will increase in the future, and the joint report by the IFRC and others have also stated that in the near future heat waves could meet and surpass the human threshold. That is, your ability to withstand the heat is going to get suffered physiologically as well as socially, and it will lead to large scale suffering, death and migration, right? And according to a 2019 International Labour Organization report, India is expected to lose 5.8% of working hours in 2030 due to the heat stress. So the heat is going to be so much high that you will not be able to work in those hours, and your efficiency will decrease by 5.8%, and the loss in the agriculture and construction sectors will be 9.04%, which translates to 34 million full-time jobs. Now the July 2021 study shows that, or it suggests that, future death rates caused by the extreme heat could be staggeringly high by the end of the century, which is comparable in magnitude to all the cancers or infectious diseases. So this is how the temperature is going to affect you, right? So these are all the studies that have been put forth in this particular newspaper article. So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. Let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now this particular newspaper article talks about the High Seas Treaty, right? We have talked about it, and now we have talked about in the last couple of days. Now we will talk about what exactly is this particular treaty, because this particular article seeks to explain all of it, right? Now this kind of newspaper article becomes important for the GS paper 3, that is conservation, environmental pollution and degradation, environmental impact assessment. Let's first understand the context of it or the story so far, and then we will talk about what are the high seas, how important are the high seas, and what is this particular treaty, that is the High Seas Treaty. So last week the United Nations member states agreed on a historic treaty for protecting marine life in international waters that lies outside the jurisdiction of any country, and for this particular treaty to be formally adopted, the members have to ratify it in their own parliaments, right? So this particular treaty is known as the High Seas Treaty. The treaty is High Seas Treaty. And what exactly are these high seas? So basically the parts of the seas that are not included in the territorial or internal waters. Now territorial waters and internal waters come under the jurisdiction of any of the country, of the respective country, but high seas do not come under the jurisdiction of any of the countries, and these are known as high seas according to the 1958 Geneva Convention on the High Seas, and no country is responsible for the management and protection of the resources on the high seas, and that is why the High Seas Treaty is going to be formulated, or it is formulated, and it seeks to protect the resources on the high seas. Now, how important exactly are the high seas? So the high seas account for more than 60% of the world's ocean area and cover about half of the Earth's surface, which makes them a hub of marine life. And they are home to around 2.7 lakh known species, many of which are yet to be discovered. And several thousand marine species are at risk of extinction by 2100 if current warming and acidification trends continue. And that is why we need to protect them. And despite the alarming situation, the high seas remain as one of the least protected areas, with almost 1% of it under the protection. So what exactly is this particular treaty? So this particular treaty is a draft agreement which recognizes the need to address the biodiversity loss and degradation of the ecosystem of the ocean, and it places 30% of the world's oceans into protected areas and puts more money into the marine conservation and covers access to and use of marine genetic resources. And an important negotiating point in this particular regard, this particular treaty has been hanging on for a long while. For years this particular treaty has been hanging on. And what was the contention or the tension in this particular treaty? Well, it was about who controls the commercialization of the resources. At the end of the day, it's all about the economy, but at the same time, if we can protect the economy of this particular, or we can commercialize the resources, then at the same time we can protect the resources, then that is a win-win situation for everyone, right? So this is it regarding this particular treaty, which is known as the High Seas Treaty. It is very important, very significant for the prelims examination, and that is why you need to understand this High Seas Treaty. And apart from it, you also need to understand an organization called the UN clause, which is very, very important, right? And we have discussed about the UN clause in the recent past as well. And if you are connected with this newspaper analysis, then you would already know about the UN clause. Now this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. Let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now this particular newspaper article talks about the Indian mission to Afghanistan. What exactly is this mission? So India is basically sending 20,000 tons of wheat to Afghanistan via Chabahar. Now, this particular newspaper article becomes important for the GS paper 2, that is India and its neighborhood relations. So, India will send its next consignment of wheat as aid to Afghanistan under the Taliban regime via the Chabahar. This was confirmed basically by the External Affairs Minister. Now, the decision announced at the first meeting of the India Central Asia Joint Working Group on Afghanistan in Delhi came after the agreement with Pakistan for sending the wheat over the land route expired, and talks on the extending the time have failed to proceed. So, basically, from the land route now you cannot transfer the wheat to the Afghanistan, right? We cannot send our wheat to Afghanistan via the land route because Pakistan has not agreed to it, but we can send it through the Chabahar port, which is in Pakistan, right? So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. You need to exactly know where Chabahar port is. It is in Pakistan, right? Now let's now head to the next important newspaper article. Now, this particular newspaper article talks about the linking of Aadhar with voter ID and what are the concerns regarding it. So, we'll exactly move to the concerns regarding it. We'll talk about what is the need for this linking, and we'll talk about every kind of scenario we can cover up in it. So, what exactly is the need for linking Aadhar with the voter ID? Well, basically, it can be the exercise by the Election Commission. So, updated and accurate record of the voter ID by the Election Commission is important, and that is why this particular linking can be used in this particular regard. And we also can weed out the duplication of the voters, so such as migrant workers or persons registered multiple times within the same constituency, that can be weeded out, so there can be no duplication of the voters. Now, these are very important legit points, but why exactly, or is this particular linking of Aadhar with one's voter ID mandatory for us? Well, the Election Laws Amendment Act 2021 says that electoral registration officer may, for purpose of establishing the identity or authentication of any person already enrolled, to furnish their Aadhar numbers. They can furnish it, but you can also get away with it by giving other documents of or a proof of residence, right? Now, registration of the electoral rules 1960 says that every person whose name is listed in the roll may intimate his Aadhar number to the registration officer, and Form 6B says that it provides the voter to either submit their Aadhar number or any other listed document, which means that giving Aadhar or linking Aadhar with the voter ID is not mandatory right now. So what exactly are the advantages related to Aadhar? Well, it is universal in nature. So at the end of 2021, 99.7% of the adult Indian population had an Aadhar card, exceeding any other official valid document such as driver license, ration card, PAN cards, etc. that are mostly applied for specific purposes. And Aadhar is more reliable because Aadhar based authentication and verification are considered more reliable, quicker and cost efficient when compared to other IDs. What exactly now are the issues with the linking of Aadhar to the voter ID? Well, Puttaswamy judgment of 2017 has to say something regarding it. So the court held that depriving a person of their right to privacy for non-linkage fell foul to the test of proportionality. And Lal Babu Hussain 1995 case, in this particular case, the Supreme Court held that right to vote cannot be disallowed by insisting only on 4 proofs of identity. Voters can rely on any other proof of identity and obtain the right to vote. So these are exactly the issues with the linking. Now, what are the operational difficulties with Aadhar? Well, it is the proof of residence only. We all know that. The second is the errors in the biometrics. Sometimes your fingerprints are not working well, right? So it basically becomes a big problem. So as per the UIDAI in 2018, Aadhaar based biometric authentication had a 12% error rate, which is a big time error rate. And the violation of the right to privacy and surveillance measures by the state is also being done in this particular regard up to an extent, says this particular newspaper article. Now, linking of the two databases of the electoral rolls and Aadhar could lead to linkage of Aadhar's demographic information with the voter ID information. Now, these are some of the problems or difficulties with the Aadhar and the linkage of Aadhar with the voter ID. Let's now talk about what exactly can be the way forward in this regard. So the first thing is that the Form 6B comes into our mind when we talk about the way forward. So it is important that the government clarifies through a correction in the Form 6B that linking is not mandatory. And apart from it, data protection legislation needs to be strengthened. So the enactment of data protection legislation that allays concerns of the unauthorized processing of personal data held by the government needs to be there, right? They need to check this particular unauthorized processing of this particular data. So this is it regarding this particular newspaper article. Let's now head to this is it regarding this particular newspaper article, and this is it for the day. Thank you from my side. Do like and share the video and subscribe to this channel. Have a good day. Bye.